In May of 2018, I was a first-year math major coming back home for the break. My friends had invited me over for a game night to play with the Commander Precon decks for a game I had never played before. I won my first 2 games, and in trying to figure out how, I looked more closely at the only card I could remember seeing in both games. That summer was also my first year working as an archery instructor and STEM director at a local summer camp where I spent my off hours trying to figure out exactly what made this land tick. Turning to the Gatherer to find more cards like it, I would remember these names for many decks to come. But those weren't the only names I'd remember from camp. On March 31st, 2022, a channel named Ristic Studies produced a video remarking on the qualities that separate pricey decks from valuable decks. And I knew then that I had to build something to reflect that. So whether you know them as Mike and Eleven, Cecily and Othelm, or any other dynamic duo, this is my beach day. Some friends are different as night and day. Some fly by the seat of their pants, and others plan things more strategically.
Preparing for adulthood.
Of course it is.
For when you don't want to get a freaking basket.
So we get tissue boxes and chocolate cake to prepare for adulthood.
Stop!
And this pair is no different. Cecily rewards us for putting instants and sorceries in the deck, and gets the most value when their mana values are as large as possible, while also asking us to keep as many cards in hand as we can. Meanwhile, Othelm wants you to pack the deck with non-token creatures and wants them not in your hand, but on the battlefield moving to the graveyard. These two are pulling the deck in very different directions, which helped make this the most difficult deck I've ever built, with months passing while I only had one card in the list, Mold Drifter, representing a very efficient draw spell that gets even more efficient with repeatable sacrifice outlets. But that template is a huge clue as to the deck's strategy. Othelm works to support Cecily's success by keeping the memories of their friendship alive. But a lot of Mold Drifter cards aren't very efficient. Fell Stinger requires those same hoops to jump through, but is just as efficient as a Stinging Study that can be played at instant speed without those hoops would be. And the more I playtested with this, I realized that kind of engine wasn't enough. It takes some serious setup, so we need more resources, we need to ramp. And our opponents aren't sitting on their hands either, so we need interaction, not to mention assembling Cecily's role in the game plan. All of these different needs of pulling the deck in this many directions require nearly every card in the deck to draw cards in order to stay on task, and that includes our land drops. Those bounce lands from earlier are a way to make land drops without going down a card, not to mention fix your mana, and also turn on some of the most powerful card draw pieces in the game in mono white. With bounce lands keeping our land count low, land tax and Gift of Estates become hyper efficient at drawing cards, while Tempt with Discovery and Pier's Whim can both replace themselves thanks to our bounce lands, ramp, and interact with opponents while being so flavorful for a friendship theme. Tempt with Discovery even rewards you more for each friend you make at the table. Every deck needs a win condition though, so let's talk endgames, because this deck has many. One of my favorite stories with this deck comes from a Triskaidekaphile win at 1 life with a Niv Mizzet in play across the table. Before it got back to my turn, Niv triggered on an opponent's removal, and, out of spite, Mizzet pinged themselves, letting me win the game. But my preferred way, and I think the most thematic way to win with friends forever, is to make that friendship last forever. 2 cards in this deck can copy one of our big haymakers 3 times, and if we targeted a time stretch or expropriate, that minimum 3 extra turns is often enough to prompt a concession. But the way I intend to win over those turns regardless is to remember the very best memories this friendship made. Promise of Power can be copied multiple times with any of those copy spells to produce a swarm of massive, evasive beaters that can easily close out the game. Now, you may have noticed we haven't talked about any cards to avoid yet. I've said this before, but I only want to talk about avoiding cards that are included in at least 30% of decks on EDH Rec. And with this deck, there aren't very many of those. And I think that's perfect. Instead, it seems like a lot of players who built this deck just wanted to put their friends forever together. And I love that. So whether it's the friends that keep you glued together, the friends that make you feel like you never left, or the friends that make you feel safe, life is too short, too lonely, and friendship too great a gift to fail to convince those who give it that you love them. Gathering friends is magic. Thanks for watching.